Yeah. So first of all, Guyan, thanks so much for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and your colleagues, and this is truly a wonderful opportunity. So, real quick, just a little bit about myself. I'm a 30-year retired colonel. I live in Vienna now, and I've been writing numerous articles for Newsweek, The Hill. I've been in the TheGeopost numerous times. As a matter of fact, I have an article coming out today. So I'm intimately familiar with what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. And of course, I was stationed as the senior military attaché assigned to Pristina and Kosovo for 2 years. So also quite familiar with the Balkans. But to your question, right, to your point, I think that if we reflect about the last year, the first thing that's very tragic is there's been a massive amount of loss of life, right? We're talking hundreds of thousands of soldiers from both sides, right? So war takes its toll on both sides, and that's catastrophic because this didn't have to happen, right? There's one person in this world, right, that made the decision to make this happen, and that is Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia. So it's important today to have a discussion about information propaganda, and disinformation, because he is the king of it, if you will, right? I think that Vladimir Putin today is a little disappointed. Right? I think that he really believed that this would be a 3 to 6 month excursion into Kiev. He would decapitate the country. He would cut off the capital from the rest. He would find Zelensky, put him in prison, and eventually Russia would be consumed. Ukraine would be consumed into Russia. And clearly that didn't happen. And he had to have a retreat out of the north, back up into Belarus. And now the fighting is heavy out on the eastern front of Ukraine, right? He's lost a lot of lives. He's lost a lot of tanks. He's lost a lot of resources and assets. So I think he's quite upset. If you're from the Ukrainian side and the West, I think that you're surprised and optimistic. There were very few people back a year ago that truly thought that Ukraine had a chance in this fight. And to see them stand up to what was perceived to be the second largest or the second most powerful military in the world is quite impressive. It speaks volumes to the amount of information operations and disinformation and propaganda that Russia spread about their military capabilities. Clearly, many of these were inflated or exaggerated, or if not outright lies, right? So we can start with talking about different disinformation merely on the aspect of what his military capabilities were thought to be and what they truly turned out to be. To me, it's very interesting. I just wrote my second fiction thriller called Balkan Reprisal, which is it's 100% about this issue, right? The friction and the tension that exists between Serbia and Kosovo, and the oligarchs, the wealthy, the powerful, Vladimir Putin. They're all in the book, right? And the funny thing is my former ambassador to Kosovo, Ambassador Delowy, he argues, this is as close to reality that fiction truly gets. So I think I have a little bit of ability to speak on this issue, right? And what always puzzles me is over the last 7 years, Serbia has become more and more and more and more isolated. And even though they're isolated, President Vučić still hitches his horse, if you will, to Putin, right? And he is extremely tied, their Slavic brotherhood, right, to Moscow and to Putin. And at this point, Serbia is an island in a NATO ocean, right? They're completely surrounded by NATO countries. So I don't know. I mean, if I was them, I would be looking far more west than I would be looking east. I think that the West has given President Vučić many opportunities. He is they are a partner for Peace Nation. They've started their opening chapters into the European Union, but he just doesn't seem to really gravitate towards the West. And that relationship that he has with Vladimir Putin, it seems to be unbending. Up until a few months ago, right? They're starting to see signs that Vučić and Putin's relationship is breaking. Vučić is in a really tough situation from a strategic perspective, and I'll explain on that, right? He does not support, right? He's come out numerous times and said he does not support Russia violating the borders of Ukraine. And of course, he has to say that, because if he says that, that he supports the invasion and that nations' borders aren't, the integrity of a nation's borders aren't sound and resolute, then there's an argument that Kosovo should have its independence. So he can't have both, right? He can either support that he wants, a whole of Serbia back and he doesn't want Kosovo to exist, or he can support Vladimir Putin and say that, Vladimir Putin should have Serbia, but you can't have both. So he's starting to have challenges with Moscow and with the Kremlin, and maybe that's a good thing, right? Yeah, so North Kosovo is tragic, right? When I was there from 2016 to 2018, this was the time frame that Oliver Ivanovic was assassinated. I shouldn't say shot. He was gunned down in broad daylight, assassinated at point blank range with handguns outside of his office. And nobody at the time, nobody saw a thing, right? It was all the security cameras and the CCTVs were off, or they weren't working, and this is just it's tragic, right? Because what Mr. Ivanovic truly wanted to do is he wanted to work with Kosovo and find a way forward, and that did not sit well in Belgrade, or whoever killed him, wherever that was, right? I like some of the dialogue that's going on, in that the efforts at building some kind of relationship between the Serbs in Kosovo, right? The ethnic Serbs of Kosovo, and the Albanians of Kosovo, to become truly a nation of Kosovars, right? I think that passions towards ethnicities are extremely strong in the region, and understandable. I don't dismiss that, but if you ask, I look at the situation from a different perspective, right? I'm an American. I'm a German American, but I have German, British, French blood in me. I have a lot of different, ethnicities inside of me, but I'm an American, and that is the flag that I stand under. You don't have the same kind of feeling in Kosovo, and I think for Kosovo to truly exist as a multi-ethnic nation, that's a good thing. I will say, right, that when I was there, my lead effort in the strategy to help Kosovo was actually to get Kosovo to move a KSF towards a true military, towards a true army. And I would tell you that while you still have a KS, you have a Ministry of Defense, and it was efforts that I took along with your senior leaders, in a strategic level, to get Kosovo to have an army. And what I mean by that was our strategy, real quick, was to overinflate the KSF with Kosovo Serbs. In other words, to have actually a percentage of Kosovo Serbs in the KSF even greater than the percentage that existed in the population. Because it was very hard for Belgrade to argue that the KSF was nothing more than the UÇK in a different uniform if there were a bunch of Serbs in the KSF, right? So here you have a perfect example where multi-ethnicity in the KSF was recognized by European nations like Germany and England and and also the United States and other nations. Say, okay, yeah, this really isn't the UÇK. The KSF truly is a multi-ethnic entity, and we believe that right now perhaps isn't the right time, but we're not going to stop it. We're not going to get in the way. So Kosovo transitioned from a ministry of the KSF to the Ministry of Defense, and that was a great day, right? And I'm very proud of Kosovo for that. But that took efforts in a multi-ethnic relationship to advance. Well, so my comments to my friends in the Balkan is stay resolute and stay true to your nation. Believe in the rule of law, and believe in democracy, right? Believe in the freedom of democracy. The beautiful thing about Kosovo, North Macedonia, Montenegro, Croatia, Albania is all of these people have tasted democracy. They've tasted freedom, right? And it tastes good. I love it, right? And it infuriates Vladimir Putin that these nations can be free, that they can have democratic elections, and he literally to his core hates the concepts of free and fair elections and democracy. So what I tell them is stay true. You're 100% correct. They tried to interfere in Montenegro with this potential uprising, and North Macedonia. Vladimir Putin's number one strategy for a very long time was to break apart NATO, right? He didn't like the alliance looking across towards Russia from the east. He hated it, right? When he looked at west and he saw this unified front of democratic nations all aligned together, This was visceral to him. He didn't like it. So he would take tons of actions to tear apart NATO. He didn't want it to grow. He didn't want it to encroach on his lands. Now, I think it's important to point out, yes, NATO has advanced, but these nations voluntarily step forward and say they want to join. NATO's not going to them and burdening them and overpowering them and twisting their arm and saying, you must become part of our alliance. It's the alliance is such a good thing that nations out there voluntarily say, hey, I'd like to kind of join your club. And that's a good thing, right? But where Vladimir Putin made one of his most strategic mistakes was the attack into Ukraine. Because if his true strategic intent was to break up NATO, that action alone solidified NATO to be stronger than it has been in the last 3 decades, right? NATO is unified on a common front. All leaders of NATO are marching to the same beat. They are stepping with the same foot, and they are moving in the same direction. So his effort to destroy NATO has catastrophically failed in the last 2 years.